think that fish just likes people. Yeah, and I was going back to the boat, and he was coming. I don't know if he saw my camera, and they weren't feeding him. Well, I heard the cheddar in a can is supposed to be really good. They'll come after that. Not that I ever remember to bring it when I go snorkeling, but I went to the store to ask for one, and they go, cheese in a can? Yeah, I never heard of that. And then so they had something called Vegemite. It was some kind of a sticky, maybe there was vegetables, but I don't know, but it was very salty. And they put it on their bread, and they make Vegemite sandwiches. They said it's an expired taste, but I thought it was salty. The fish would like it. But the one time I was able to snorkel in Fiji, I left it behind. But then we went to this little village.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome everybody to the March 17th School Board Workshop. Our first item on the agenda is an update on the Alta Vista Eagle Academy.
So I'm going to invite Dr. Kingsley to come forward. Dr. Shirley as well. Yeah, both of you want to come forward? Or whoever's going to speak first? All right. Barbara will let you do it. Okay, sure. Yeah, there's.
How's that? There we go. I have one of those voices that carry, so I didn't know if I would need that. It comes with the occupation. But thank you for inviting us today. We are so excited about being able to share some of our data, just some information about our Eagle Academy, because we are going into our fourth year. And we have grown from a small program that was created based on a meeting that I had with my best friend, Mary Kay Henson, a very dear person in our community that entered our school one day and said she wanted to do something to make a difference. So she has been working side by side with us for about 3 years and helping us to create the Eagle Academy and move it to different levels within the program. But let's start real quick by talking a little bit about Alta Vista, because I think that's really important that you get a little bit of understanding about who we are and what we are. So if you look at the data, and on the slide you'll see we're a Title I school, and we are at just about 93% free and reduced lunch. We've grown. Dia Smith is my assistant principal, and she's here with me today. And Barb Brannigan is our literacy coach. But when we came 8 years ago, we were at 78% free and reduced lunch. We're now at 93%, and we vacillate between 93 and 94%. So it has grown in the 8 years that we've been there. So we've had to do a lot of work in order to be able to meet the needs of the children that are so at risk and some of the most neediest children in our district. But we're a very diverse population. You can see by the graph that we have quite a number of African American students, Hispanic students, and some other diversity in the school, and teachers that are just very well equipped to be able to work with our diverse population. So if you go on to the next slide, just some of the things that we're an A school for 11 years, despite the high level of poverty, and we've of course received a lot of different accolades by being one of the top Title I schools in the state for exceeding expectations a year ago. That was recognized statewide, and then we've had a number of different awards that I won't go into, so you can just read a little bit about who we are and what we've accomplished. But people ask us what our story is, and just to kind of give you go ahead to the next slide, I just want to show you just for a minute, because this kind of helps explain what we're about. When we were working with children for the past 8 years, as a school, we were finding that we were working with children all year long, getting them to a certain point with our achievement scores. The students would leave for the summer, and they'd come back in the fall, and there would be a digression. And it would take us 3 months, give or take, in order to get the children back up to where they were maybe when they left in the spring. And we were finding that their vocabulary level was so low that we were really working to really bring up the language skills and the vocabulary skills.
Let's look at two children, one from a middle-income
go ahead.
family, the other from one of the millions
Sure.
of low-income American families. As the two kids head off to kindergarten, look what happens. The middle-income child starts out with a 6-month lead. The low-income child is already falling behind because of a lack of access to early reading and preschool education. During their year in kindergarten, in the same school and classroom, the two children will learn at about the same rate, so we'll move them both forward 9 months. But look what happens in that first summer between kindergarten and first grade. Our middle-income child moves ahead about a month in reading because learning of one kind or another continues over the summer. The low-income child falls back about 2 months. So when school begins again, when they go back for first grade, the gap between them has already widened. During first grade, again, they move ahead at about the same rate, another 9 months. That next summer, the activities and lifestyle of the middle-income family keep that child moving forward, but the low-income child has fewer opportunities to reinforce good habits like reading, and that child falls farther behind. Then we come to second grade, and again, our two children learn at the same rate. But the summer after second grade sets our low-income child back again, and our middle-income child moves forward again, and the gap widens again. By just the third grade, the two children are already far apart. By the end of fifth grade, the gap between the children is 2.5 to 3 years. It will keep growing through middle school. So you see, without addressing what's happening during the summer, it is impossible to ever catch up. It's impossible to close the gap. No matter how much high-quality learning goes on from September to June, every year the gap widens.
So when we were thinking about why we started the Eagle Academy, we saw this video at a presentation and felt it just really, in a nutshell, tells why we are doing what we're doing and why we started the Eagle Academy almost 4 years ago. And as we look at where we are at this point, it kind of gives you a history. We have 4 different cohorts taking place. So if you look at the slide with the dates on it, where it says our initial class, we had about 62 children back in the summer of 2012. Our second year, our initial class of our kindergartners moved to first grade, and we had a whole new group of kindergarten students entering into our program, and we had 166 students. By our third year, which was last summer, we had our initial kindergarten class going into second grade this year, and we have our entering kindergarten and entering first grade students, and we had about 244 students last summer. This summer we're growing even more, so we are including our third grade students. So our initial class of kindergarten students back in 2012 are now our third grade students coming up for next year, and we're projecting about 350 students.
Is that all the kids in all those grades, or just certain kids?
No, we are inviting 100% of our students, and we hope that 100% would come. This is not 100%. We're working at about 80%, 85%, because we know that just historically we've been tracking data on the percent of students that come and those that do not compared to how many are in a class, and we're finding that about 80%.
Is that what percentage of low income, or do you know?
Well, we're at 93%, so it's mostly all
okay.
income.
Thank you.
So, and we invite all children in our school to come in those grade levels because we feel that all children could benefit from our program. So as we move on to the next slide, just to give you some of the components of what the Eagle Academy is about. It's broken up to 3 different parts. We focus on our children, our parents, and our families. And we're looking at a 2-generational approach in order to meet the needs of students and parents working together and educating both at the same time. So our students, we work with them on an academic program, which is our Eagle Academy from 8:30 until 1:30, 4 days a week. and it's an intensive program in reading and math, and we also work on writing. The teachers are our teachers, basically, mostly from our school, which is very exciting because they're strong stakeholders, and oftentimes they are able to have their children in the program that they had in the summer for the school year. So they're actually almost getting a whole grading period ahead of being able to work with these children and creating a learning environment that's really conducive to them making the learning gains that they need in order to be equal with some of their peers in other schools. We have our STEAM program in the afternoon, which is our arts integration. We put an arts into the STEM, and it runs from 1:30 until 5:30, 5 days a week, because we really need to be able to have an extended program for our children whose parents are working. If we dismiss them at 1:30, our parents would not have anything to do with them in the afternoon, so we have to be able to provide that extended day care. But it's not daycare, because what we do is we're integrating a lot of the academics that we do in the morning into the arts, and we're providing science, technology, hands-on, just a lot of hands-on work and in the arts programs also, to be able to give them that well-rounded education. And then and on Fridays, we do a lot of field trips. We write a number of grants through the Ed Explore program in order to have the grants funded. And these children who have lived in Sarasota all their lives for generations in their families have never been to Jungle Gardens, or they haven't been to Moat Marine or the Children's Garden, or a lot of these cultural and arts programs that we take for granted, or we go to, or we take our children to, we're able to give them those types of experiences. And that has been a real asset between the STEAM afternoon program and the Friday program in order to be able to really round out their education and give them those experiences that other children have had in our community. Our parents attend our Parent University once a week, and this is a mandatory program where parents actually sign contracts in order to attend and they attend every Thursday night. We've had up to 300 parents every Thursday night come to our school where they take different classes, and I'll go into those classes in a minute. But they love it. A lot of socialization is going on. They're spending time with their children's friends, parents, and getting to know other families, realizing that they are not they're not dealing with hardships that other people aren't. So they're getting a lot of support systems by attending these programs. Plus, they're gaining educationally and learning.
I think that's great, and I wanted to ask you a question because trying to get the parents engaged and having them sign a contract, were there some hurdles trying to get them engaged, and how did you guys overcome that?
Thank you for asking that. One of the things that we have found at Alta Vista for years is lack of parent engagement and participation in their child's education. And I think this is something, as Title I schools, we are always, as principals, talking and collaborating in how we can increase that engagement. And we felt that if we could provide the programs, the first year we just set that expectation, we wanted you to come. And then year two, we found that parents really did come year one. So year two, we said, you know what, we're giving them this free program all summer long. We felt they needed to be more active partners in the program with us. And the interesting part that we have found through the 3 years, it is spreading into what we are doing year round. We've had I would say probably 100% increase in the number of parents that come to our Renaissance programs and celebrations. We have larger participation in our parent nights where we're doing a lot of educational programs where we're teaching them how to work with their children at home. So it's really paid off. Initially, we got a little bit of kickback, but after that, the expectation was set, and they're on board with us. And they're actually having a lot of fun, which is what we really want. We have our career and vocational programs, which I'll talk about in a minute, and then our CNA program, which is our Certified Nursing Assistant program, which is a program that we have on campus. The Community Foundation of Sarasota has bought all the equipment, working with the Red Cross, and we have it housed on campus every summer. And then this year we actually had a class during the school year. So we've had about 35 moms that have graduated as CNAs, have passed the test, and are working in the field. So it's very exciting, and that's the two-generation one future approach that we're taking in educating children and parents together so that they can be better supporters, pursue educational goals, and provide a role model for their children. Our families program, we have a lot of family fun nights on Thursday evenings. We do a lot of, provide dinner for families every Thursday night. Sometimes we're feeding up to 600 people in our cafeteria. It's wild, but it is so much fun, a lot of talking, a lot of socialization. We're able to talk with families on different levels, and it's a real positive thing. Our food pantry is open every Thursday, so parents know they can have dinner, pick up their children, take home bags of groceries to help them with their nutritious meals at home. And then we have a social worker that was hired through the support of the Community Foundation and really wonderful donors to support us being able to meet the social emotional needs of our families and help them during crisis and situations where they need some extra support. So that's kind of just a general overview of our program. So let's kind of talk a little bit about the collaborative effort, because obviously we cannot do this on our own. And it's been a huge collaborative effort. And I have to tell you, every time I pick up the phone and call someone at the district, call someone in the community, and ask, can you help with our Eagle Academy this summer, I have had probably 100% just on board wanting to be a part of what we're doing. So we have a lot of people from our district level helping us with anywhere from looking at the data to helping develop curriculum to food, nutrition, transportation. We have probably about 30 community organizations that are involved in our Eagle Academy during the summer, and either providing classes or meals, our food pantry, different ways that they're able to help us. And that's a lot when you think about 30 organizations that are on board helping us every summer.
Do you have your regular teachers teaching this, and are they paid extra for the summer, or how do you take care of providing the teachers for this program?
Good question. So yes, we do. We hire our own teachers to teach the students in the summer, because they get to know their own children and they get to have them during the school year. And they understand the curriculum, they know the school, the culture. This past summer we hired a couple other teachers that were from other schools that I knew from my experiences in other schools that wanted to work during the summer and wanted to be a part of what we're doing. We have actually had a teacher that is part of our leadership academy that wanted to get some experience outside of her school and wanted to work alongside of us in working at the program. So the word is getting out, and people are wanting to be a part of it.
Good, thank you.
But we do pay our teachers during the summer.
Great.
So just a lot of people helping us with our Eagle Academy, and we know that it's a collaborative effort and a team effort in order for it to be successful. So I'm going to have Barb Rannigan come up and just talk a minute about what we do with the children during our academic part.
Good morning. Is it on?
You press
the button. I'm going to talk briefly about the academic portion. And if you look at the slide, those are some of the readiness skills that we work with our kindergarten students during the summer. When students come in, we have a variety of levels. Some of our kindergarten students are readers, and some of them barely know their first and last name. So we have to make sure we cover all of those readiness skills in reading as in math. Also, before the summer academy starts, we pre-test all of our students. On kindergarten, we'd use the On the Mark, and we take about 5 subcategories from that assessment, things such as letter identification, letter sounds, and then we use that data to help differentiate our instruction. As Dr. Shirley mentioned, we do have our own teachers there, so the teachers meet collaboratively for 2 full days prior to the academy, and we do all of the lesson plans. We do lesson plans for on level, below level, and above level, and our plans are very, very specific, even down to what books we're going to read as read-alouds, and we go ahead and put stickies in those books so that we can make sure we're using DOK2 and 3-level questions. So when we plan, we really, really plan those full days. We pull in all of our materials so that when the academy starts in June, we are set to go. We also post-test the kids at the end of the academy so that we can measure the growth that they make during that summer. And that is so important because we love to look at the data, we love to analyze it, and we spend hours and hours analyzing the data because you can always dig just a little bit deeper. So these are some of the readiness skills. We work a lot on fine and gross motor control. Can they hold a pencil? Do they know how to hold scissors? Can they cut? Can they get along with each other? And the last one where it says school procedures, I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. That is a huge thing for our incoming kindergarten students because if we can get them on board then, when they start kindergarten in the fall, they're set to go. They already have those things kind of under their belt. So on the next slide, for grades 1, 2, and 3, we also do our pre-assessment. And our pre-assessment for those grades, we do a fluency probe, a comprehension, and a math assessment. We do that at the beginning of the academy, and again, we'll do it at the very, very last week of the academy so we can measure the growth. Under the reading proficiency, we work with phonemic awareness for our first grade students. Then we also cover phonics, fluency, comprehension. We use informational text as well as literature. And then we are really trying very hard to work on those critical thinking skills, those DOK levels, and show teachers how to present questions in those higher levels. For math, we work on computational skills, which would include fluency. For our first and second grade students, we work a lot with just plain addition and subtraction facts. And as they move into third grade, then we pull in the multiplication. Higher order thinking, we really practice a lot with, can they read the question? Do they understand the question? Can they solve it? And once they solve it, is there another way they could solve the same question? So we spend a lot of time on those higher order thinking and problem solving in math. Under language proficiency, we work on language conventions. We also show kids how to have collaborative conversations with each other. And when we do that, we encourage them to be good listeners and in turn be active participants in classroom discussions so that we are covering those language or speaking and listening standards on the New Florida standards.
With such a large community of Hispanic children, what are we doing with English language learners in that summer program?
We embed them right into the program, and we find that that is the best way for them to acquire the language. We, of course, move with them in smaller groups when we differentiate our instruction. We make sure that we do a lot with vocabulary, that type of thing.
Before you move on, you were talking about kindergarten readiness for the incoming kindergartners. I'm just curious, do you know what percentage of your incoming kindergartners have had VPK?
We have been talking with the VPK. Do you know the percentage?
Well, we also are working with Early Learning Coalition, Janet Kahn, in identifying students that are coming from pre-K programs and with our district for the VPK programs. Maybe 70%.
Is the issue then that they're not taking advantage of the free VPK, or is the issue that they're not learning? Because you said some of them come in and don't hardly know their names.
That's exactly right. When they get off that bus that first day, it's like, what's your name? And sometimes they can tell us their first name, and not always.
Well, and some of it comes from coming from families of poverty, and they aren't introduced. They don't have parents that are sitting with them, reading books. And if you think about what you did with your children, before they went to bed every night, you were reading books with them, talking with them, a lot of language-enriched environments. So they're not getting the type of environment that they need in order to be able to be equal with other children that are experiencing those types of.
And I understand that, but I'm just curious, with all the money that's spent on VPK, is it an issue that they're not aware of it, or they don't choose to enroll, or are they just not learning what they need to learn in VPK?
Our data at the district level is those students that participate in VPK have higher percentages of readiness level. Now, there still is a gap because even going into the VPK program, there's that language gap that Barbara was referring to. But they are not the students that aren't able to say their name, and many of them have some of those readiness skills. They still need that additional boost, but they definitely are better prepared if they participate in a VPK program.
But again, you said maybe 70% participate.
That's off the top of my head. I can probably come up with that
Which would
number.
mean maybe a quarter
Right.
or so don't even take advantage of that.
And I believe, are you working with the Early Learning Coalition
Yes.
to try to figure out where that is? Because if it's a communication piece, if they're not aware of VPK.
We're working really closely
Yeah,
with
that's what I thought.
Janet
Great.
Kahn on that because we really, in fact, she's been an incredible advocate for our program.
Great.
Years ago, when I volunteered at Bayhaven, one of the things I did was help coordinate those parents who hadn't done their, I think it was 8 hours of volunteer work or something like that, and found out that one of the problems that we had and why the parents weren't doing these things, even taking papers home to correct, was because the parents were illiterate. They couldn't read, or, and I'm sure in your area, some of them don't speak English. Are you working with some of those parents on their literacy skills and their English language skills?
Absolutely, and that's part of our parent university classes, and we carry them throughout the year, where we are offering English as a second language for our parents twice a week at our school in the afternoons, and then we are actually offering a GED class, and both these programs run during the summer and through the school year, and technology classes, so that we can help them further their education.
Thank you. I think that's so vital.
So important.
Yeah, because if the parents don't know how to read, they can't.
We also have a person working with parents on Tuesday mornings on strategies for school success in the areas of reading and math to just give parents some ideas on what they can do at home to help their children.
Yeah, I think that's something we probably ought to look at doing at some more of our schools because you just see parents sitting there waiting for their kids after school or something. Maybe we can do an after-school program for parents.
We capture these parents at 8:30 when they come in the morning.
Thank you.
Which is wonderful.
Thank you.
I think one of the things we might look at is VPK programs to engage the parents then. Because if you're waiting to engage the parents by the time they're coming into kindergarten, you've already lost a lot of time. So perhaps my daughter assesses pre-K schools. I mean, that's what she's a licensed clinical social worker, and early childhood development is her specialty. So that's what she goes from school to school, assessing how clean they are, what kind of books they have, how the teachers interact. So maybe that's something that we can also make Janet Kahn and her group aware of, that they should be doing more with the parents early on.
Okay, on the next one, this was our first day of the Eagle Academy last year, and you can see the picture on the left. We had about 250 parents and students. It takes a lot of organization, a lot of planning to make that run smoothly, and we have definitely perfected that over the years. We do offer free breakfast and lunch. We have a mid-morning snack. Bus service is offered in the morning, but not in the afternoon because most of the students stay for the STEAMA program. And the little girl on the right was one that was her first day of school. We spend a lot of time on routines and procedures. This was cafeteria, how to get their trays, how to walk in line, how to ask the cafeteria workers what they want. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, those are children. They're walking with bubbles and wings, so that bubbles the air in their cheeks so they can't talk, and wings so they can't touch another person close to them. So we do that all over campus with kindergarten and first.
They love it.
They do, and it actually does work.
It does work.
It does work. And we practice like walking in line quietly, walking on the right-hand side of the sidewalk, that type of thing. We also do routines and procedures in the classroom. We have a classroom teacher in the upper left-hand corner. She's doing a small group, but in the meantime, she's got to make sure that the rest of the students know what they're supposed to be doing, whether it's independent work or working collaboratively with some of their peers, and how they maneuver inside the classroom. So it's important that those procedures are also set up. And I can tell you the transformation from our kids from the beginning of the academy to the end of the academy is truly amazing. The students have acclimated themselves to the learning environment at school, a lot less tears in the fall when school starts. And on top of that,
Maybe not from the parents still.
but on top of that, we are offering them 7 weeks of intense academic instruction, and it really makes a difference. It is a phenomenal program.
So I'm going to move along quickly because I know we've got a time limit, but just quickly, our STEAM program in the afternoon, a lot of enrichment with giving the children experiences that they wouldn't ordinarily have. If we go on to the next slide, it talks a little bit about what we're doing with them. We have Florida Studio Theater coming in for 2 hours every day, working with the students on improv, drama, music, dance, singing, which is really a great thing that we started last summer. We have the Sarasota Arts Conservatory with the circus clowns coming in and working with the students on a daily basis, helping them with integrating the science concepts into circus acts. And then in both those groups put on a program at the end of the 7 weeks, which is very exciting for the parents to be able to see their children perform, building a lot of self-esteem. We have a lot of enrichment clubs and outdoor recreation, field trips, and science. We're looking at engineering. So we have a lot of technology going on during the summer in the afternoons. Our parent university, on the next slide, is 7 weeks. We have up to just under 300 parents that come every Thursday nights to go to classes. We have a lot of food and family, and we're feeding about 600 people on Thursday evenings.
That's a lot.
That's a lot. And the first 2 years, we did all the food ourselves, and we looked at each other and went, really? We did the food, we did the food pantry, we did everything. Our bookkeepers, our registrars, my secretary, they're all coming in. We're making panic calls. Can you come in and help? And we finally, the light bulb turned on and said, we don't have to do it all. And there are resources within our district, and our food nutrition group is thankfully doing that for us each summer, which is a godsend, and we appreciate their support. As you look at the classes, our goals, and really we really want to strengthen parenting skills, really give them some additional knowledge so that they can help promote their child's achievement, because we know that every parent wants their child to be successful. We wanted to help build those trusting relationships and build stronger communications with our families, in addition to providing educational programs for them. Some of the classes that we've offered last summer dealt with parenting skills, technology, health and nutrition, and you can read that and see what we're offering. But really successful. Parents are engaged. They're learning. We actually give them stars on their name tags to give them motivating. They compare the number of stars that you all have, and they get a star for each time they come, and they're very excited to be a part of that. So as you go to the next slide, you can see even our staff up serving food was having a good time and smiling. Our food pantry is open every Thursday, so parents get to take home food when they leave at the end of the evening. And as we move on, our 2 Generations, One Future CNA program is really just a star of in our whole program, because we are giving our parents a way to have a better life, achieve educational goals that they have wanted to achieve for years, and be better providers for their families. Most of our parents that are in the CNA program haven't opened a book since they dropped out of school when they were 16 years old, and they are now reading, studying, forming study groups. Their children are seeing them doing this for the first time in their lives, so they're really providing a wonderful model for their children, and they're becoming even stronger and more connected to our school, and walk in, and they know that we are going to be there for them and supporting what they need. So we offer classes in culinary arts. We have 2 parents that graduate with cosmetology, and we have administrative assistant, precision machinist, and we have quite a number of other opportunities for parents to continue to get their education. So Dia's going to share about our data.
I'm going to talk just a little bit about our data. As you know, we've alluded to it this morning. So it really tells the story. And if you look at the first slide, what we did is, as Barb Brannigan mentioned, we have a pre-test and a post-test. And we actually have a lot of data. We just kind of picked some snapshots to give you an idea. So this particular one looks at concepts of print, which is actually, you take a book and you say, this is the front of the book, this is the back of the book, do the children know to read from left to right, that type of thing. And each summer we have consistently seen, if you look at the yellow or the gold color represents the beginning of the summer, and the turquoise is at the end of the summer. So each summer the kindergarten students have shown a huge amount of growth in this particular concept that comes from On the Mark. And then another one that I
noticed that in 2014, it might just be anomaly, but that 77% being ready I think might have something to do with the parents and the siblings of the ones you had the year before, because now the parents are working with the children. Could be. We'll just have to wait and see.
That's a great idea, because we have been trying to figure that piece out also, and digging with our data and trying to analyze it on different levels. But that's a great approach to look at.
This next slide looks at reading comprehension, and what is particularly startling is this one is a direct correlation to a little video that we watched about summer learning loss, because the two columns on the left, these are all of our students at the end of kindergarten. The lighter color represents the students who did not come to the Eagle Academy over the summer. So at the end of kindergarten, they're pretty good. 71, 77% proficient. And then if you watch the arrows and watch the color, the students who ended at 71% proficient did not come to the summer program at the beginning of first grade. Only 49% of them are proficient. While those who ended kindergarten at 77% proficient in this reading comprehension skill began first grade at almost 80% proficient. So they did not lose their summer learning. We felt that was huge.
I know there's a lot of reasons that they, can't commit to the summer because it's summer and people take vacations and stuff. But do you have any idea what percentage of your students do the Eagle Academy? And
we look at about 80% of each class attend the Eagle Academy. Historically, we've kept that data so that we can look at who's coming, who is not coming, and we actually, on a spreadsheet, write down the names of every student in every class. And then we track which ones come, which ones don't, how many years they attend, and then we write down why they're not attending. And the reasons vary anywhere from they were going to be gone for most of that time period, so bringing a child in and out of a program can be disruptive. They might... what are some other reasons?
They're going out of town, or one child's going to go stay with their dad in another state.
Right,
and
various reasons.
We work real hard to try and get the word out. We've sent out the pamphlet. We mailed this out one year. We make a big hoopla on the news for months.
We have
they know
7
about
to 8
it.
personal meetings where they're mandatory meetings where parents, if their children are in the program, have to attend so we can set the expectation and then tell them about the program. And then do all the registration, because they have to be registered at Alta Vista in order to attend the Eagle Academy. But through that process, we have conversations with every child's parent in every grade level that attends the academy. So we know basically what's going on.
Okay, so the next one looks at grade 2 students. Oops,
yes.
sorry.
Yes.
Do you have a lot of students choicing into your school? Or a fair amount?
I don't know what that number is. Interesting enough, 2 years ago, typically at Title I schools, we're day one and we're below enrollment, and we're out there trying to get parents to come in and enroll their children because it affects staffing, affects child and so forth. 2 years ago, day one, we were at 75 children over enrollment. That was unbelievable. We've never experienced that. And so we had the opposite situation, which was very exciting, and we really felt that it was directly correlated to what we've been doing.
Absolutely, and that's the point I wanted to bring
That was
up.
very exciting.
Mm-hmm.
So our next one looks at fluency for our grade 2 students. So last summer we had grade 2 students for the first time. So we looked at pre-testing them at the beginning of the summer and then at the end of the summer again, showing growth from the Eagle Academy. And then we looked at math. So we created an assessment on counting and cardinal numbers, and we've done this 2 summers now. So the summer of 2013, there was not as much growth as we would like to have seen. However, the following summer, there was quite a bit more growth in their ability to count and use cardinal numbers. And then this one is on grade 1 students with addition and subtraction. Again, 2 summers of comparison. How did they do at the beginning of the summer? They showed growth. So they're entering their next grade level with more information, better prepared. And then this last one is number sense for grade 2 students. Again, pre-test shows that they made growth over the summer, started at 52% and ended at 67% proficient. This is just a little bit of data.
We have lots. So as we look at what the outcomes are, and we're constantly talking about the data, constantly reevaluating and assessing what we're doing, because every year we're just getting better and better. We're refining what we're doing. We're creating a model that, in our mind, was always to create a model so that other children could benefit from it, because we really believe that it's not just about Alta Vista children, it's about all children. And we want to make sure that what we're communicating is that we have the credibility in the model that we wanted to be able to present. But so when we look at some of the outcomes, and we're seeing tremendous children outcomes. We're seeing a real increase in school readiness of our incoming kindergarten students. We're seeing that decrease in summer learning loss, as you saw from our data. So that children are not losing that learning over the summer. We're able to work with our children for 7 weeks during the summer and do some early identification of what some of their learning needs are, and be able to differentiate instruction and create put a process in place in order to help these children become more successful when the school year starts. And then we're able to really do better in our class placements, because we're looking at classes during the summer, seeing what children really work well together, which ones don't, and are able to make some adjustments at that point. The impact of our children being better ready for school and not having that summer learning loss has been huge, and it's changed the culture of our school. As far as our parent outcomes go, we've seen a lot of socialization between parents and between us and our parents. Parents are walking into school with smiles on their faces, and they're not getting those first calls of their child in distress, but they're getting phone calls saying, boy, we'd like you to come and join with us and be able to do some conversations on how we can help your child be successful. And they're coming in more readily. We're getting a higher percent of parents attending conferences, attending parent evenings and meetings than we have had in the years past. We've seen a higher an increased engagement of parents in their child's education, and we're building trusting relationships. But equally important, we're giving parents educational opportunities, and that's really exciting for us, because we're really giving them a lot of hopes and dreams that they've had all their life that they haven't been able to achieve on their own. And through the support of the Hensons, the Community Foundation of Sarasota, a lot of organizations in our community, our school district, we've been able to achieve a lot of goals and provide a program that we feel that is at a point where we need to look at taking it to other schools.
Okay.
I just wanted you to mention the component of having a social worker at the school that's working with the parents, and what difference that has made.
Probably if I had to say one single thing, and it would be our social worker, because we're finding that our children there's a need in the mental health area with our children and our families, and the supports that we can give them in order to not just at the family level, but the child level. And the social worker has really been able to create that liaison work between the families and the school. And she's also been able to help us with our two-generational approach.
That's one of the, pardon me, that's one of the areas I have been waiting for us to have extra funds in a budget so that we could have more social workers.
It's making a difference.
Can ask Mrs. White, that's been my cry for the last 4 or 5 years now. More social workers needed in the schools.
We do.
Well, my cry. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I think we can see why you were Florida's Principal of the Year. And I'd really like to thank you and your staff for putting in all the extra time and effort into this program, and also our community partners, because we know it took extra funds, it took extra emphasis, and it really is a team effort here. And as the team leader, I mean, I've got to give you the biggest pat on the back, and definitely can see why you were Florida's Principal of the Year.
Thank you.
This is a wonderful program, and we're so proud of you and what we have here. Thank you.
Okay.
Well, I just want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to Laura Kingsley, to Dr. Barbara Shirley and your staff. I want to say thank you to the Hensons. Mary Kay, thank you for all you all are doing for this program. But this is only the tip of the iceberg. And if I had my way and plenty of money, we'd be doing this and implementing this summer in every one of our Title I schools. Last week, I had the pleasure of going to Tallahassee, and we went a little early this year before there was a budget in the House and some other things. And some of the people that I called on, I didn't know and didn't have a relationship with. And what I talked about was this program. And when I left, every one of them was shaking their heads. Yes, this is great. And I think we're going to have some visits this summer from Tallahassee for people who are interested in this program, because I think this has a great opportunity across the state. This would, give us a real heads up and a way of helping those students, because Scott Limpy and I have talked about this several times. If we haven't gotten a child to read by third grade, it's a good chance we never will catch them up. And if we haven't spent that extra time having them love school, they won't. But what we have done with our students in the last 15 years and our families in this communities and others across the country is not great. And I say that because we had 9/11, we had 2 wars, we had lots of school shootings, we've had a gigantic recession, and these families have not overcome that. And that's why we've seen that our free and reduced lunch is over 50%. I don't think we get enough credit for the great job we do in the school district having that high of poverty level, because poverty is what is impacting schools. And poverty is something that we need to eradicate. We need to work with these families. We need to find ways of making it possible to know that they have hope. And when you see these women graduate with a certified nursing assistant's degree, and you see their pen going up and their child coming up and presenting with the rose, there's nothing to do but cry. But it's a great program, and we need to, and Dr. Bowden has done some wonderful, remarkable work, and is continuing to do that with our families in finding out what they want to do, whether it's culinary arts or perhaps being working with children in early childhood centers. We've got some things that would help them to do great things and to have hope, and that's what we want to do. Is we want to build up the opportunity for our families to be hopeful again, to have new careers, and our children to be hopeful and to go forward. And that is so very important. And unless we attack, if you will, 2 generations, it won't happen.
I fully agree. This whole program's inspiring, and it's something I talk about constantly, because it just proves that community working together and thinking outside the box, I mean, you can absolutely tackle the problems that we have. And I commend everyone, those community partners, the Hensons, and you guys for working tirelessly. And the 2-generation approach, I think, is really what's so exciting. And we do have so many resources here to continue that on. So I'm excited to see us, move forward with it. I like that it's a pilot program and it's tailored to the needs of Alta Vista, and I know that moving forward we're going to be tailoring it to the individual schools we're rolling it out to. But it's absolutely exciting, and it just shows that it definitely takes a lot of resources, but it works in there, and you can overcome a lot of the challenges we have. So it is, I use the word inspiring because that's exactly what it was. So thank you for all your work.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So
But
much.
before I end, I would just want to thank Dia Smith, my assistant principal, and Barb Brannigan for the partnership we have formed in creating this program, because you can be a leader, but if you're out there leading and you're out there by yourself and no one's following, you're not going to be leading. And they have worked hours and hours and hours alongside me creating this program, and are just so dependable, and I really appreciate the work that they're doing.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for allowing us to come.
Well, to use Bridget's term, we're now going to have Mitzi Corcoran come and give us an inspiring presentation on self-insurance.
Good morning. Hi. Frank, you stole my line, actually. I was just getting ready to say, not as inspiring as the wonderful work that Dr. Shirley and her staff are doing there at Eagle Academy, which is just amazing.
I'm sure Al will back you up and it'll be inspiring later on.
Yeah, well, wait till we talk about the budget. But it is still a very important topic. Our insurance, health insurance in the district is the second largest expense we have behind our employees' salaries. It represents a total spend of over $40 million. That includes retirees and dependents and everything. But the cost to the general fund is in excess of $31 million a year. So it is a pretty important topic for us to kind of monitor and talk about. This discussion is about whether or not the district should entertain the idea of self-insuring our health insurance plan. We're self-insured for workers' comp and dental insurance, general liability, auto, but we are not self-insured for health insurance, which is, substantially larger than all of those put together. So we first introduced this topic to you in a workshop last May. Since then, we've done some additional research, and like last May, I have those who know more than I behind me. So our insurance consultants and actuaries from Aon, as well as Lynn Peterson, the risk management, are here if we have any technical questions that I can't answer. But we also subsequently, after doing some more research on the topic, had met with the Financial Advisory Committee to review the topic of self-insuring with them. We had Aon come in also and give them a presentation. It was very educational for them. We were able to get some really good feedback. From Jeff Jackson is with PGTs, their CFO, and they have self-insured. And Jim Blucher, who was with the City of Northport, has experience in that also. So they were able to provide us with some really good feedback. So I'm kind of hoping at the end of our discussion today, if we could just get some general consensus, given the timing, it's March, that if we did want to make a move towards self-insurance, that I could get consensus on that, because there are quite a few things that need to happen, which we'll discuss later in the presentation. So if we just want to go ahead and get started, the very first topic that I wanted to kind of talk about was our particular trend for medical. So there's a graph on page 3 in your read ahead that basically kind of shows the green line shows, I'm hoping you have color. You don't? Oh, I'm sorry. The green line, the line that goes at a pretty steep angle is if we did nothing. If we'd have just, on average, based on the 40 some odd different insurers that Aon tracks and trends, and we did nothing overall. We didn't make any plan design changes. We didn't modify or monitor what we were doing. We could be looking at an average premium per employee per year of about $1,100 per employee per month. I apologize. But because of the changes we made, we RFP'd in 2011, received some substantial benefit changes. We worked with the union to make changes to our deductibles, our copays, and so on. We've been able to pretty much maintain a pretty even trend as far as our premiums for our fully insured plan. So again, overall, we could be paying substantially more if we weren't already managing the plan appropriately, but there are additional savings to be had. So on the next page, we have the number of employees that we've covered on average, the premium we pay on average for employee, and then the associated claims per employee. Yeah?
I'm looking at that, the premium paid versus the claims paid, and in almost every case it's over $1,000, and in 2011 and 2012 it was considerably more than $1,000. If we were paying more than $1,000 in premium per year than what we were getting in claims, why then do the premiums increase? I mean, you would think if we were paying more than $1,000 per year in premium than what we were getting, that the cost would have come down.
That is true. And we did have the premiums went down in 12, and then they went down again in 13, and then they went back up in 14. But again, in each case, there's still a differential between the claims, which is the cushion or the amount of money. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but to me it is the cushion that the fully insured insurer would like to make sure that they have, because they are assuming all of the risk. Because no matter what the claims are that are ultimately paid, they have to pay them because I've paid my premium. So normally they always make sure that the premiums are more than adequate to cover the claims. But again, with the Affordable Care Act, there have been other things that have come into play, which, okay, there you go, are our rebates and our profit sharing that we built into our plan for 2012. So we have been receiving funds back from the insurer as a result of those plan provisions.
And it's J.R. Shanley.
J.R. Shanley.
Is his button pushed?
J.R. Shanley from Aon. And I just wanted to add that some of the differential, definitely Mitzi talked about some of the surplus share arrangements that were in there. So those came back. But there's also some components around the cost of doing business for the insurer. In terms of expenses, claim payment, the folks that they have on staff to answer the call, overall administration, in addition to some of the things that we're going to talk about a little later around profit, additional margin there, and premium taxes that are associated with insured business and not with self-insured.
So, but if you look at the claims paid column, which was the one I kind of wanted to draw your attention to, you can see that based on our claims, they're relatively consistent in terms of cost per year per employee. So they're relatively easy to manage. If they were $6,000 one year, $4,000 another year, $7,000 one year, it would be very difficult to try to even entertain the thought of going to self-insured. But since they're pretty consistent, except for that 1 year where there's a substantial dip, it makes it a little bit easier to then work towards determining what your rates need to be to cover the cost of your claims.
And I understand that, that I think it's Sarasota County, that when they're self-insured?
Yes, they are.
That they can have incentives to their employees that will help bring down these insured costs, such as having higher deductibles or co-pays for people who don't have their annual physical, who don't get their blood tests, or I guess maybe it's you get a reduction if you do this. It's sort of like the carrot rather than the stick. And so that there are things that we can do to encourage our employees to do things to lower our claims. Perhaps even smoking might be one. But those are things that we might be able to look at if we go into self-insurance.
There's much more flexibility when you are self-insured because you are not necessarily tied to an insurer's plan that's filed with the state. You file your own plan with the state. So yes, and you have access to data to help you drive decision making. That's not always available through a fully insured. We're kind of getting ahead here, but that's okay.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. That's absolutely fine. So basically on the next page are the benefits of self-insuring, which is what we've kind of been addressing. So from a financial perspective, when you self-insure, you save on the state premium tax. The Affordable Care had 3 fees, one of which was a health insurer fee. So when you're fully insured, you have to pay a health insurer fee, tax, whatever you want to call it, that you do not have to pay when you're self-insured because you're your own health insurer. And then, again, the carrier's margin, which I mentioned before, that assumption of risk and profit. And also the district holds any required reserves, so we also have the opportunity to, make some investment income off of those dollars. So again, under plan flexibility, which is what you were talking about, the state has mandated benefits for fully insured plans, such as you must cover dependents to the age of 30. If you are self-insured, you can change that to the federal requirement of only insuring them to age 26, which could take some dependents off of your plan. And again, you're not restricted to that off-the-shelf plan design. The insurers have to file with the state, and so when we make plan design changes, we have to find a plan that fits when we make these changes for us to fit into their filed plans. We would file our own plans, and so we could design them to meet our needs if we need to.
My understanding, Mitzi, excuse me, is that this is one way. If we were to look at clinics, we would need to be self-insured first before we would even begin looking at having our own clinics.
And that's a very good point, because by providing a clinic, there's a large capital outlay if you were to build a facility or even renovate a facility to make it available. That capital outlay, in order to have that get paid back to you, you would want it paid back through reduced claim expenses. When you're fully insured, it's the health insurer that's paying that. You pay a premium to them. So they're the ones who ultimately reap the benefit by having a larger margin between the premium and the claims. When you're self-insured, by reducing the claims, you're the direct beneficiary of that because you were the one who pays those claims. So that's why to make a large capital investment like that, you really need to be the one who's receiving the benefit in order for the kind of return on investment to kind of work out. Then another part that actually Jeff Jackson at PGT mentioned that they have done this is you can separate the administration of your medical from your prescription. And we just received some information from Aon yesterday that showed over the past 12 months our medical trend has gone up by 4%, but our prescription has gone up by 30%. So because there has been a lot of advancement in the drugs and a lot of specialty drugs out there that are doing good things, that cost has exponentially increased. And so there is a potential savings to be had by separating those, which we can do by being self-insured. And then again, the ability to incorporate innovative health promotion. This is what you were discussing, Shirley, with the ability to create, lots of different wellness incentives and programs around your benefit package. So then the next impact is, what is the impact to the employee? Because this is more a change in the administration of the plan and how it's being funded, there really is no direct impact to the employee, particularly if we select an administrative provider such as a Florida Blue, and piggyback off of an existing contract that then allows there to be a seamless transition for the employees. They wouldn't notice anything different because it's all being done on the administration side that the change is being made on. One of the big,
Would we need to increase our employees? How many employees extra would we need to hire in order to administer this plan?
We don't have any plans to do that. We may be working a lot of extra hours, and we can get into that in the next steps.
I see that when I read through here. That's what made me ask the question.
Right. As far as on the next page, we'll go through some of the administrative responsibilities. Because you are self-insured,
that's where I am.
You are. Oh no, that's fine. You are the plan fiduciary, so you are the one fiscally responsible for your plans. And you are responsible for filing all of the affordable care fees, which is the PCORI fee and the transitional reinsurance fee, which that fee actually goes away in 2016. Is that my correct? Okay.
And she's talking about you, Caroline.
Yourself.
So, yes, we would be responsible for filing those fees. We will also be responsible for all of the tax filings, which actually begin this year and are required whether you're fully insured or self-insured. So that test, we just had a meeting on that this morning. Very troubling in terms of how we're going to gather the required data and fields that they're looking for. I think it's going to involve quite a bit of reprogramming on our computer systems part and a lot of additional work on our HR payroll processes. So it's a fun time for that. But we also have to have a separate bank account in order for whoever is administering the plan to be able to access the funds in order to be able to make the claim payments. Again, your cash flow is not as predictable in terms of that particular fund because you don't know what your claims are going to be, whereas when you're paying for fully insured, you just pay a premium and you're done. So you know exactly what your cash flow will be. For the general fund, we'll know what the cash flow is because we'll still have it basically be a premium that we pay into a separate self-insurance fund. And then we're also responsible for obtaining stop-loss insurance and filing all of our plan documents with the state. So administratively, yes, a bit more burden. I think the plan documents, once designed, just need to be updated. I think There's a lot of heavy lifting on the front end, but then it just becomes maintenance on the back end. So I think we can manage with the staff that we have, but I will cry uncle if I have to. And hopefully, with the savings that we're thinking the plan may create, it may offset the cost of any additional administration we may need to incur, if there is any.
What we were talking about in Tallahassee, some of the other counties, was instead of hiring full-time employees to go to temporary offices. And I realized why the management of the plan couldn't be a temporary, but maybe some of the work could be done through a temporary agency, so we wouldn't have to incur that expense of hiring a full-time employee for.
Yeah, it's peaks and valleys. So
yeah
I think during the peak time we can either have some people come in and help, or our existing staff can work some overtime. But that's the administrative components. And then the big hurdle that seems to occur for most districts is the 11208 requirement. The requirement by the state statutes for public entities to maintain on reserve pretty much at all times a minimum of 2 months of your estimated claims. And that just has to be so that if you ever stopped your plan, you would have enough funds available to kind of cover the run out of the claims. This is required at the end of the first 12 months. I have had some interesting conversations with other finance officers that have gone to self-insurance, and as long as you certify to the Office of Insurance Regulation, is that who it is? Yes. That you have adequate reserves available across all funds, I think you're usually okay. I do believe that it is something we would want to have set aside in a separate fund, but I don't know. There's another slide on here on different approaches to use towards funding that we can discuss. So, but each year you're required to file with the state that the plan itself is actuarially sound. This is where these guys will come in, review our plan, and make sure that we're in accordance with the requirements of the state. And that's one of the first things we have to do when we are ultimately wanting to go to self-insurance too, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So on the next couple of pages, we did a financial analysis of us going fully insured versus self-insured. And on the fully insured plan, we assumed what's called an 8% trend, or basically an 8% increase overall on the claims and expenses of the plan. On the self-funded side, we did the same. Obviously, the claims are the claims. But we also took into account the reserve and the amount of the change in the value of that reserve each year for 3 years. A 3% trend or increase year over year in the cost of administering the plan. 20% on the stop-loss premium. When we spoke to you last May, we were discussing a $250,000 threshold for stop-loss. This assumes a $500,000 threshold on the stop-loss premium, and we think that that's manageable. We don't have substantial claims in the high claim area.
So are you saying, so I understand, are you saying that you would expect that to increase 20% a year?
Year over year.
Wow.
And when we talked about the stop-loss premium, I believe at $250,000, the cost for the premium was about 2.3.
Right, 2.3 million.
And then at 500,000, it's about 1.3. So there's $1 million differential in the $250,000 per claimant overage. We figured, since there are so few of those, that differential in the estimated amount of claims between the 250 and 500 and the cost of the premiums, it was worth it to go to the 500,000. That's the estimate we made. We do also, on stop loss, if we do go to self-insurance, we would want to RFP that, get a rate guarantee, hopefully for 2 years if we could. If we can't, we would RFP it every time. Because of the expense of that and the rate with which it increases, that's something you would want to compete pretty often on.
That difference of $1 million on the $250,000 and the $500,000 stop loss. So you're saying there was less than 4?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There were. But we do have some very high cost claimants, which you'll see on the next page. And then it also takes into consideration the health care reform fees, the transitional reinsurance fee in 15. It will go away between 16 and 17, and then the the PCORI, or that patient-centered outcome research. So on the next page, you saw one of these last May. It was a little bit different, the numbers. This is now based on more current information. But based on a fully insured plan, we estimate, now I have to put my glasses on because I can't see. We estimate that the claims for this year are $39 million. The retention, so this is the fees, the administration, and the risk profit component for Florida Blue is $6.7 million for a total of $46 million. So that's our base moving forward for both fully insured and self-insured comparison. So going into 2016, there's a differential there between the claims in 16 and 15, and you'll see that each year. That differential on the claims is the amount of recovery we anticipate from the stop-loss insurance premium for those high-cost claimants. And then in 16, you have what our expenses are, and those expenses do include, they're offset by what we anticipate we may get in interest earnings. It includes the taxes that we do have to pay related to the Affordable Care Act, and administration. The cost of the stop-loss premium is in there. The the administrative services company, whether it's Florida Blue or some other third party that would administer our plan, those costs are in that expenses line. So the difference in 2016 between what we believe we would be paying Florida Blue and what we would be covering before having to make that reserve payment results in a savings of about $2.8 million. Now, the 11208 requirement, that 2 months worth of reserves, is $6.86 million. So there's a negative there of $4 million. And ultimately, what we've shown from each year, 16 to 17, 17 to 18, is at what point have we fully recovered the cost through savings of having to make that reserve deposit. And we believe it'll take, by year 3, we will be able to realize every dollar of savings and have that fully funded, that reserve.
Although realizing we're not actually spending that reserve. We're
Correct.
setting
It's
it
just
aside.
moving it ultimately into another pocket. Right. The reserve is now literally set up in a separate account and keeps us, good to go with the state and the insurance commission. So, but if you look at what the annual savings are, they're estimated at, 2.8 in 16, 3 in 17, and about 3.2 in 18. So, again, that difference there is the amount of, the district assuming the risk is ultimately what it is. So, on the next page, we have some different scenarios for how to fund this reserve requirement that is mandated by the state. So the first one is just to pay it all from the general fund and have the general fund incur that expense, or from other available unrestricted reserves that are available in the district. Then the second column is where you adjust your rates that you're charging to your general fund or your grant funds that are paying for people, and you adjust your rates to include the cost of that reserve the first year, and that's how you collect the reserve in that fund. I have a feeling, I've heard from a few districts where they said, well, we haven't had to raise our rates since we've gone to self-insurance 3 years ago. I'm wondering if they didn't take this approach where they raised their rates to cover their reserve requirement that first year, and then as their claims have gone up year over year, they still haven't had to raise their rates because that rate included that reserve piece. It could be, could not be, they just could have great claims experience, but there's a couple of ways. And then there's, the split funding of that. And again, we have that first year savings of 2.8. So really what we're looking at in terms of having to meet it in the first 12 months is like $4 million, that differential between what we were saving and what is required. And then if we wanted to keep our rates in 2016 exactly what they were in 2015, we would not only need to fund the 11208, we would actually be a little bit short on what we anticipate our total claims would be. So we don't anticipate that there won't be some form of a rate increase on our health insurance premiums, even by going to self-insured. It's just a matter of how we want to differentiate that. And we can bring you back a lot of different rate building models and ideas. I also, if we did plan to go to self-insured, I would like to align our plans, more to the value that they provide. Years ago, our high PPO plan that we have, which is our most expensive plan, was the most expensive plan. Since then, the HMO plan, the high HMO, is actually more benefit rich, but costs less because we made a conscious decision, to uniformly apply any rate increases, not plan by plan, but against all plans. So when you have one that was more expensive than the other and you say it's an 8% increase and you apply it to all your plans, now that high PPO plan's kind of out of sync a little bit with what the cost really should be versus the cost of the HMO plan. Am I saying that correctly? Absolutely. Okay. So I would like, if we did go to self-insurance, to maybe more appropriately align the benefits being received or the cost of those plans to the actual rates that we would charge.
Just so that one plan's not actually subsidizing the other.
Correct. That's absolutely true.
Right. I mean, it's really adhere to its own actuarial value that you would see in any of the the marketplaces out there. Is staying aligned with that, and then you can adjust those as needed on a go forward. The other piece that I wanted to mention is that when organizations look into going self-funded, it's typically over a 3-year period at a minimum in terms of approaching this. It's usually not a 1-year venture in terms of what the time frame is. It's a long-term approach to funding as well.
You're talking a 3-year commitment as opposed to taking 3 years to get into it.
Correct. Well, in terms of the fluctuation of the claims experience, we never see organizations go into self-funding and then flip back to insured immediately. It's typically a commitment of 3 years.
Okay. And then also in your packets, I did provide you with a copy of a letter that the chair of the Financial Advisory Committee, John Craner, sent to Frank, that after their review, they thought it would be to the district's benefit to consider self-insuring or self-funding. So on the next couple of pages are kind of, if you do wish to move forward with the transition, the things that we would need to do. By September, we must have a preliminary filing done with the state and a plan for our 11208 or the funding, the 60-day reserve requirement. How are we going to fund that? What is our plan for that? Okay, see, now you even put this SPD. I don't even know what that means, JR. State requires SPD for
Summary plan description.
There you go.
Leave it to JR again with acronyms.
But we have to file all of our plans with the state. We have to have them approved, and so all of that, again, takes time. So that would be kind of the first step on what we would need to do. And then, again, proposed reserving method, the calculation of your premiums, identification of other projected income to the plan, which would be, your investment income that you may have coming into your plan, and then what your loss ratios are. So kind of for the next step component from us is that we would want to complete by September of this year because we have open enrollment beginning in October. So we would need to first select who the administrative services provider would be. Who is it that we're going to have be the company you call when you have a question about a claim, or it can be a Florida Blue, it can be a United Healthcare, it can be a NetNet, it can be anybody. We do have many RFPs that have been issued that we can piggyback off of and save the time and effort associated with that if we believe that the benefit being provided at the cost being provided for the least amount of disruption to the employees. So we have to kind of analyze all of those factors in the ones that have already been done to determine if there's one out there we could use to piggyback on. We would have to obviously establish a banking arrangement for the payment of the claims. We would need to, and also in that vendor, there's a requirement to have a third-party or third level appeals committee, which must be made up of people outside of the district. So we can have them work to establish that committee. It can't be made up of them either as the administrator. So they would help work with the establishment of an outside appeals committee, because and then we would also have to work on doing the stop loss premium, doing an RFP for the stop loss premium. We have to figure out and calculate what our rates would be and our contributions to our self-insurance plan. Again, the carrier, the accounting processes, to review all of those and setting up the right internal controls from an audit perspective of the plan, drafting the documents, and then doing our 11208 filing. So there's a lot of kind of front-end work that has to be done. So we can't just sit around and do nothing. And then ongoing, obviously, we are required to have and make sure the employees who are working on these things have the appropriate HIPAA training. That's very important. And what access they can and cannot have to personal health information. We need to calculate and pay the fees, make sure we're maintaining our appropriate reserve levels every year, and then, of course, the IRS tax filings, which are going to be a whole lot of fun.
Jay?
Well, I'm all for this because it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that we would save money. But do you have reservations? I always trust.
I don't.
But verify your information sometimes. But I always trust your recommendations. And do you have any other concerns?
I don't. I think, it'll be a pretty monumental task from a staff perspective, but I think I have wonderful staff, and they do whatever they need to do to get the job done. So, and we do have wonderful support from Aon, and they have done this on numerous occasions, so I'm sure they've got a template we can use, and, so I think, and I do believe that this is probably the best course for the district to take. Most large entities, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty much, it's about a 3,000 employee level is where you can kind of assume that you're large enough to be able to handle the ebbs and flows of claims as they come through.
Yeah, we actually start modeling it out for our clients around 1,000 lives is where they'll start to consider a self-funded arrangement. So Sarasota Schools is well north of that.
Right. There's a little bit more consistency overall. You'll have those who have no claims and those who have higher claims.
And just one other question. And is there any benefit that we'd have if we partnered with the county or with some city governments or other entities within this county? I've had several people who have asked me that before.
And we have looked at that. There is, it's funny, there was a consortium, I believe, of school districts that were trying to get together for health insurance purposes, most of them being smaller school districts. We would have been the largest school district in that particular consortium. When you are the largest in a group of a bunch of smaller, you end up ultimately subsidizing the smaller. So it's actually not beneficial in those cases. We have looked at Sarasota County government, they're self-insured, and some of the other local entities, and one issue is you have multiple collective bargaining units. You have the sheriff and the firefighters and the Teamsters, and you have our own. So each one has its own requirements. So to try to get a plan that would get every bargaining unit to agree to is a little bit difficult. And you may want to have a different set of benefits. The Sarasota County government, I believe, is all under a health savings account plan, which we don't even have here. So, and it's relatively sophisticated, so it would take a lot of education to make sure that people were reaping the full benefits of those kind of plans and not finding themselves in a position where they're paying large amounts of money out of pocket. So, again, it's just, we have looked. What we've actually looked at more, or that's what we feel is a little bit more doable, is seeing if we can't partner on some wellness things. They have a very robust wellness program at Sarasota County government, and they also have a gym at their downtown offices that I know that they are sharing with the city of Sarasota. So I'd like to talk with them about maybe seeing what we could do about maybe partnering, sharing in some of the costs, and then allowing our employees to maybe go there. We're actively working again on our facility here. and actually have a meeting tomorrow, I believe, with Florida Blue to discuss some partnering with them. And so, again, we could offer that maybe to some of theirs. But, you know, you have security issues and a lot of other things. But we're trying to work through all of those things.
Several years ago, we did try to partner with the hospital, county government, and municipalities. And it did not work. It was, I mean, we really wanted it to work, but it did not. Mm-hmm. There's just too many different variables between all of the entities that we had to let it go. But I thought it was a fabulous idea at the time until we actually started to investigate it, and it just didn't work.
And we are large enough in our size that there isn't as much benefit to be gained. I mean, there's economies of scale that you kind of saturate to at a certain point. So if you're smaller, there's a large benefit to consolidating to become a bigger group. We're already a pretty large group with 5,000 plus employees or family members that we're covering. So the savings aren't really necessarily there to be had in that particular type of an environment.
Shirley?
Yeah, thank you for bringing this forward too, and it's been a long journey. I think I first learned about self-insured for school districts, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 4, at an FSBA conference, and it was, you know, one of those breakout sessions. And the first time, I don't know, and then the second time, and I talked to members from other districts who were doing this, and it was making, and I'm not sure who put it on the workshop agenda so that we could talk about it and going forward. Thank you, Caroline, because you knew about it from before. You know, so that we can bring it forward to discuss it, throw the issue. And I think the first year it kind of fell on deaf ears, and then we would bring it back, and we all took a trip down to Lee County to see what theirs looked like, and you all did some numbers, and you know, it seems like it was a long pull, but you know, with our restraints of being able to talk to each other, and your restraints having to do things in a timely manner and get buy-in, I think is coming to fruition here, and what looked like a long process. I understand why, because it's a big commitment, and I want to thank you for keeping at it and getting this final report to us, finally.
You're very welcome.
Would the next step be perhaps putting it on an agenda or for board meeting, or what's the next step?
If we feel that there is agreement, a consensus that we should pursue the next steps that Mitzi has outlined, that's sufficient right now. Board action isn't required on any of those steps. At some point, there will be required board action as we certain documents, and so there will be actions that will be required for the board to take. But right today, we're looking for consensus that we should move to those next steps.
I'd like to see it.
Bridget?
Thank you for putting this together. I think, as I've also spoken with different districts, and I know they've gone to self-insurance, I see a lot of value. I know there's definitely risk there, but I appreciate you putting this all together. As far as the timeline, because there is that realistic for you on the overhaul for it to be done correctly? And
I think so. As long as we get consensus now and we can start working now, I think we shouldn't have any problem getting it all done.
Great.
I'm certainly in favor of it. For the first year I brought it forward, nothing. Second year, a little bit of a discussion. So I'm more than happy to see this moving forward.
And I agree.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Next, we'll have Scott Lempe talk about our capital program.
No disrespect intended to the capital program, but I'd whole rather a lot talk about the Eagle Academy. Just a whole lot more
Inspire us, Scott.
Inspire you. That's a tough act to follow. What they're doing up there is just amazing. So what I'd like to do today is just spend a little bit of time. I tried to give you a read-ahead that was somewhat self-explanatory, I hope. So what I want to do is just kind of walk through some of the highlights of the read-ahead. And what I want to do today is talk a little bit about the capital program. And maybe a good place to start is just put the conversation in context. We talk about capital each year at least 3 times a year with very different purposes. And when I think about the capital budget, there's really 3 phases. There's the plan, there's the program, and then there's the budget. We had our first conversation about 2 months ago when Kathy Eba, your director of long-range planning, presented the capital plan to you, the CIP, the capital improvement plan. There was a lot in there, but I think two things that were especially significant. Thing number one was essentially the planning context, what's going on in Sarasota County as we think about what our capital plan needs to look at. And then thing number two was a set of draft goals. As we think about where we think we ought to be spending capital money, are they consistent with where the board wants us to be spending money? And so at that particular point, we agreed, I think, on 5 goals. Those goals were educational services and planning, asset preservation, making our campuses more physically safe and secure for our kids, giving our students access to timely 21st century technology in a fiscally responsible way, and then fifth and finally, think about how you pay for all that. So those were sort of the 5 goals that I think the board agreed to. So what is in your read ahead, the spreadsheet that's at the second tab, is essentially a fiscally feasible 5-year program. And what the program does is take particular pieces of each one of those 5 goals, ties them to a program, ties them to a dollar amount, and then puts them in a fiscal year. So you can kind of see where they lay out one year to the next. You can see how they compete with each other, and you can kind of see the dollar amount that's associated with each one of those priorities. So that's kind of what you see in that spreadsheet. So what I thought I'd do is just kind of quickly go through the 5 priorities and talk a little bit about how that program and the money in the capital budget responds to each of those priorities. The first goal really is just a planning goal. It says give some forethought to how we're going to spend the capital budget. That really starts with the CIP, so I think about how it is we do that, the crafting of the CIP, and then talking to you about the content is where it starts. Today's presentation is kind of the middle of that process. So the planning goal, I think, is addressed in those 2 places. One of the other things, though, that's in that goal is think about what good government looks like and how we work with our partners around the county to do things smart. And there are a number of ways that shows up. I included just 3 examples in the read ahead. First is the Suncoast Technical College Northport. That's a project that has the potential to be at least a 3-government joint venture between the school board, Sarasota County government on the joint use media center library, and perhaps the city of Northport relative to either a conference center, a public safety training facility, or both. So just a neat example. If you think about what that campus could represent to the citizens of the city of Northport, it's pretty exciting to think about. The second is the one big project that you'll see in the execution year of this program, 15-16, is the addition of the Venice Middle School campus renovation. And we'll talk about that more when we get there. But it's a collaborative process in that we're working both with the city of Venice and the county of Sarasota on the community engagement effort at the front of that project. What is it the community thinks needs to happen at Venice Middle School, and how do we use the project in a smart way to respond to what the community thinks? And then finally, there are a whole bunch of these kinds of examples, but when I talk about safety and security, Toledo Blade is the next place we're looking at doing a big fence project. And when we do that, we try to look at ways to not only make the campus safe and secure in the context of single point entry, there's only one way to get on to the campus, but at a school like Toledo Blade, if you think about where it sits, the entire south end of Toledo Blade is residential. There's houses right out the back gate. Toledo Blade has a baseball field, a soccer, and when I say field, it's a play area, but they have a baseball area, they have a soccer area, they have an intermediate playground. How do you make that campus safe and secure during the school day, but then have those kinds of ancillary facilities available to the community after school? So those are just some of the collaborative things that I think are in Goal 1. Goal 2 is the one where probably most of the read-ahead focuses, and that is asset preservation. Right now today, the board has about 9 million square feet of floor space under air. That's a lot. It's expensive, and so part of what you've said to us is take care of it, take care of our investment. A whole lot of things going on under the heading of asset preservation today, and you really see them in the capital program in 2 ways. You see competing major construction projects, and I'll highlight a couple of those here in just a minute, and then you see a lot of ongoing operations and maintenance that tends to be buried in the individual budgets of the departments, primarily but not solely the facilities department. So I just hit on a couple of the big examples. Sarasota High School, is underway. We're actively in the second phase of a 3-phase project there. The first phase technically ended, I guess, when we turned the school over to kids on the 5th of January. And if you haven't been in that building, it is just absolutely spectacular. It probably will win some awards before we're done architecturally, I think. We're in the middle of the second phase now, and that's an ongoing project today. The money was actually in the 14-15 budget. The Bayhaven project, Bayhaven today has by far the most antiquated cafeteria in our district. If you walk in some of our other cafeterias and you walk into Bayhaven, you're disappointed both in the cafeteria and the kitchen. So that project started off as a give them a new cafetorium and kitchen. It also includes the addition of a new media center, which will allow us to get the media center out of their courtyard. And then we'll include enough classroom space to get all the portables off of that campus. It's just a really, really tiny footprint, and having portables is just not good. So that project is coming out of the ground now. If you drive by the, the western side of that campus, you see a great big new block building that's coming out of the ground. That's what it represents. Pineview School is funded over a 3-year period. This is kind of a mechanical systems renovation on steroids. It is in the design process today. No physical work has started there. I did want to let the board know, though, that there are 2 things that are both beyond the project scope and the budget scope at Pineview that we just need to do. One of those 2 things is, as we've started looking at this campus really closely, we found some pretty dramatic signs of water intrusion. And I could go into some details if you cared about what's causing that. But we brought in a moisture consultant, and we said, help us understand what's going on here, and more importantly, how we stop it. They have shared a bunch of information with us, several different ways that we can address this water intrusion issue. All of them are going to cost money. That's a pretty big school. Water is coming in through the block face, and most of that school is designed with a block face. So there's just a lot of square footage of area that is taking on water. So the solution is going to add about a $3 million price tag to that project. It's in the budget. You'll see it on the second phase of my spreadsheet as an addition to that campus scope and that campus budget. The other much smaller thing that we think is smart to do while we're in the buildings is Pineview is a pretty open campus. Not only is it open, but a bit like Sarasota High School, the front office is hard to find. So we've said if we can redesign that administrative building to put the front door on the parking lot side of the campus, we would then put a fence from the administration building to the student union. We'd put a fence there and then bring the front door to the parking lot side of that building. It'll cost us about $500,000 to do that office renovation, but now is the time. If we're going to have that building gutted to put in new ceiling and ducting and air handlers and all that kind of stuff, now is the time. Shirley?
Is that water intrusion causing a mold problem, or not to that stage yet?
We have seen some minor indications of mold around windows. Most of what we're seeing is the water is getting, without going into a ton of detail, the construction of the campus is cinder block. There's a vapor gap, an air gap between the cinder block and the brick fascia. The water's getting inside that brick fascia and either staying in the brick or running in between the brick and the cinder block. Eventually, though, it's going to leak through that cinder block, so we got to do something about it. You're not seeing a lot of mold inside the classrooms because of that. The only places we've seen any kind of indication is right around windows where you have some flashing issues. The flashing underneath the windows, I would argue, is installed wrong. And so what the flashing is doing is forcing the water to go to the end of the window and run down into the classroom almost. So there'll be some internal repair associated with that as well.
Can we go back a minute, Scott? Because
of course.
To the Suncoast Technical College in Northport, I noticed now we have a conference center and a public safety training center there. So is that going to be undertaken and paid for by the Northport municipality? Because that wasn't in the original scope of our plan.
Yeah, and you may be ahead of me.
No,
I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about it later too, but we can do it now.
It's
if
on
you like.
page 5.
Yes, and it's later on too when I get to kind of additional things. But let's talk about it now. The city of Northport we had a community meeting down there, 2 or 3 weeks ago, and we invited all the folks who live around there. That's right, you were there. I forgot. And one of the things we heard is one of the things that's lacking in Northport is meeting space. And in fact, I had gone down a month and a half ago or so and presented to the commission on what it is we plan to do up here. Remember, this is all fallout from the convocation conversation where they said we'd like to do something with you too. As we talked about this, I said to the commission, one of the things we need to understand right up front is what you mean by a conference center, because it can be anything from a conference room that seats 15 to Robards Arena, and there's a whole lot of options in between. And pretty much to a commissioner, they said, we like what you have at the North County Technical College campus. That's about a 3,000 square foot space. So the initial conversation was, fair enough, you just pay for that 3,000 square feet. The more we thought about it, though, and it might have even been one of the commissioners that brought this up, but if you think about the North County campus, there's a portion of that that's Dr. Bowden's, that's the dining room for the bistro. And those things are together, and that adjacency makes a lot of sense because now you have the ability to provide food to people who attend use the conference center. That adjacency makes a lot of sense. So we thought, okay, if we're going to put a 1,000 square foot dining area on the South County campus, and what you want is a 3,000 square foot conference center, then we look to the city to pay that 2,000 square foot delta. And they haven't signed an agreement yet, but we're working on one with their staff. And I would tell you, I think we're pretty close. The fiscal impact of that, though, is the culinary arts program right now in the budget is in phase 2. It makes sense, I think, to bring the culinary arts program into phase 1. We would then design that conference center as an integral part of the campus. And I don't know what this is going to look like yet. We haven't given the architect the green light to do this. But then you have the conference center like the North County campus, where the conference center, the culinary arts program are an integral part of your campus.
And what about the Public Safety Training Center?
So think about burn building. It's more than a burn building because it's a piece of it is a burn building, but then law enforcement can practice repelling, and there's a whole bunch of things that can do. Our arrangement with them, I think there would be a little bit different. What we would do is we would set a piece of the campus aside and say, if you want a public training facility, there's a footprint over there. Your money, your design, your construction, do it when you're ready. We think there's some opportunities to partner, particularly with the technical college, on how Todd could use that space to offer recurring training. There's a lot of things I think he could do, and I think, frankly, that the fire department in Northport could do, being co-located with the technical college. But a little bit different arrangement. Rather than a joint design, joint construction, we would just set aside a footprint and say, when you're ready, put it over there.
I just needed a conversation because it had not been in our previous conversations.
Right.
So I need a clarification, so thank you.
Sure. I think they both have momentum. I think we're a little closer on the agreement on the conference center, and that's really just because we started there. But I think they both have some momentum in the city of Northport. So if the school board is inclined to do both of these things, then I think they make sense for you, for the technical college, for sure. Okay, I think we talked about everything we needed to at Pineview. For sure, the biggest new project that you'll see in the 15-16 recommended program here is adding the Venice Middle School mechanical systems renovation. It's a $12 million project over 2 years. The scope of the project would look a lot like what we did at Sarasota Middle School, Laurel Nokomis, and Booker Middle School. Our goal would be to walk away from that campus knowing that we don't have to go back there for about another 10 years to do major maintenance. But the systems are beyond their useful life, so it's time to be thinking about mechanical systems renovation. And then if you look at
I just have a question. When you do renos, you never know what's going to happen. I mean, so is there some certain percentage of the job that you put aside in your initial calculations of some of these projects that would be based on, I don't know what I'm going to find when I get there, and I really need to have a certain amount of money set aside?
Yes, and it's become, I don't want to call it easy, but it's become a bit predictable with the middle schools because we've done a number of them now. So as we look at Venice Middle, we know, for example, that one of the variables is what kind of condition are the chilled water lines under the ground in. When you dig them up, sometimes you look at them and say, these are in great shape. Sometimes you say, gosh, we need to replace them. So you kind of build that into the budget, you bet. If you go a year out from the execution year, 16-17, Brentwood is the next project that we have on our radar. Brentwood is, once we finish the cafeteria at Bay Haven, Brentwood will be the next one that is the most antiquated. They don't have a cafetorium. They have a little tiny cafeteria. And frankly, it's just a school that's looking tired. Brentwood needs some attention. It was born the same year I was. So it's time to do something at Brentwood. Thanks.
What about the HVAC there?
The chiller plant itself and the pump house and all of that stuff was completely redone about 4 years ago, plus or minus, so it's in much better shape than what you're seeing at the middle schools.
Okay.
And then on the O&M side, I said there's a lot of things that aren't major construction projects but fall under the heading of asset preservation, and I just listed some of them there. We're going to be doing some individual building renovations at Alta Vista and Inglewood this summer. We want to do at least one more thermal storage project this year, in part because we're hearing rumor that the FPL rebates are going away. And that's really what's made it affordable for us to do these. So we want to do them while the rebates are still out there. And one of the things I'd like to know if the board is comfortable with is the money from those rebates. If you're comfortable, for me, it'd be good if the superintendent had the flexibility to decide where that money goes. And let me tell you what I mean by that. The rebates come back right now. They go into the general fund. If you go back 4 or 5 years, we were rolling all of that money into our energy program and saying we'll use that rebate money to fund the next kind of step in energy conservation. During the economic downturn, we knew that there was probably better ways to spend that money, so we moved it all into the general fund. What I'd like to be able to do is take that money and spend it on the next energy conservation project, the next thermal storage project, but all that's going to kind of depend on where we end up with the general fund. So just for us to have the flexibility to decide where to spend it would be helpful, I think. And then it's amazing to me that Riverview and Tatum Ridge are already coming into their paint cycles. We have our buildings on a 6 or 7 year paint cycle. It's hard to believe they're that old already, but they are. The next goal was safety and security. A lot of effort going into the physical safety and security of our buildings. Focus really on fencing and gates and cameras and the infrastructure that supports all that. And I won't belabor the examples I used in here, but I mentioned Toledo Blade already as our next fencing project. We'll have to do a little bit of renovation on the front office door to make it all work, but that's largely a fence project. Ashton Elementary School is a school we want to go to this year and look at their entryway. If you're familiar with Ashton, you go in the front door and there's just a great big wide hallway that takes you to the media center, and the reception is off to the right. We'd like to bring that reception more to the front of school and actually be able to control access. If you go to a place like Brentwood or McIntosh, Fruitville, you'll see kind of what we're thinking, but be able to make it more deliberate that you don't have immediate access into student spaces. That'd be the goal at Ashton. I guess those are kind of the big. I don't want to go by safety and security real fast, but those are kind of the big issues.
I appreciate that. I had a question or two.
Shoot.
Kind of goes with when I was talking to you guys about when you say we refresh computer. What's upfund mean? Is that a Al term or a Mitzi term? When you upfund something?
It might be a military term. Add to the budget.
So upfund means?
It means add to the budget.
Okay.
Yes.
And what's collocate at the Conference Center for the Culinary Arts?
Co-locate? Put them together?
Oh, okay. Well, it was just written wrong there. I thought you could make that with another word. So that's co-locate.
Where are you?
Under STC Northport Culinary Arts on page 13.
Okay.
Does it make sense to collocate the Conference Center? But that's co-locate.
Co-locate.
I thought you made up another word. Okay. Okay, thanks.
Well, that was easy. Let me talk about technology a little bit, because there are 2 or 3 things that one of the goals was give our students access to technology. I highlighted some of the real big things that are happening there. Kind of the mainstay of our giving students access to technology over the last few years has been our refresh, our computer replacement program. If you recall, last year the board upfunded the computer refresh. Those are both terms that Frank loves. To accelerate it from a 5-year refresh cycle to a 4-year refresh cycle. Last year was the first year we did that, so I've included the schools that'll have their computers replaced this year, but it really does make a difference, and so you can see the schools that we're doing there. In fact, tonight, I think, or this afternoon, you actually act on the 2nd year of the active panel purchase. This is actually the replacement of the whiteboards. Believe it or not, those whiteboards now are 10 years old. In 10 years, as technology goes, is pretty old, so it's time to look at something new. The new active panels, if you haven't seen them or had an opportunity to play with them, the picture here is a science teacher at Sarasota High, but the capability of those things is amazing. They are cheaper to buy, they're cheaper to operate, they're much more mobile, so just a great piece of technology aside from all the great things it does inside the classroom.
When we went to technology, you passed over something that's sitting over there, those emergency evacuation chairs. Were you going to talk about that? I mean, I was just wondering what that was over there. And
Sure, it's in the read ahead, and I did go by it. You're right, but many of our schools today are 2 or 3 stories. And so we ask ourselves the question, if you have to evacuate in the case of a fire and, for example, an elevator doesn't work and you have a student or a staff member in a wheelchair, how do you get them out? What that chair is intended to do, and there's one on each floor of a multi-story school. They're here at the landings, too. You've probably seen them. But it comes with training, and what that allows you to do is safely evacuate somebody who isn't mobile, who isn't ambulatory from a multi-story building. That
thank
help?
you. So we're going to be buying more of those, or is that what it's in?
Most of them are purchased already. Right. What we're doing now is installing them and training the staff on how to use them.
And we talk about Tech Active, and we're short 11 classrooms district-wide. Is that correct? That was the number that was mentioned this morning at a breakfast meeting of STEM Smart. And
I haven't heard that short.
I thought we still had 11 more to go. Is that correct, Mrs.
Okay,
White?
I don't know who said.
I think it was 11 to go for if the Gulf Coast Community Foundation would do it, being full funding.
Okay, but we should be, that project is complete, correct?
I don't know that it's complete. It depends on how far we expand it.
It depends on what, in terms of the math and science.
Yes.
Yes, that is.
This summer we'll complete math and
We'll
science.
complete this
Yes.
summer,
That's-
which has always been the top priority.
Right.
The question is, do we design other ELA social studies classes along that design, which Gulf Coast isn't necessarily going to be able to be a partner with that, and it's then what does the district want to do with those classes? But our math and science will be complete.
This is going to be a busy summer in Tech Active. We're going to do a total of 64 classrooms, including we agreed to put 16 at Pineview. We did 8 last summer and 8 this summer, so it's going to be a busy summer at Tech Active.
Could you tell me what the total cost of the new panel installations will be?
Over the life of the installation? No, I can't off
What
the
is
top
the
of my
cost
head.
for us to purchase
This year,
the new panels?
this year's, I think the panels themselves are like $2.3 million.
Yeah.
And then there's another $300,000 that goes to the stand, so $2.6, $2.7 million for this year's.
For this year.
Piece of
and
it.
how many pieces will that give us?
Gosh, we're going to replace about 90% of the whiteboards. One of the advantages of the active panel is it's mobile, and so where we put an active board in, for example, a conference room, you don't need to put one there anymore, because if you need one, you don't use it a lot. You just roll it in from a classroom. So we're not going to replace one for one.
I just remember that initial purchase was like either $10 or $14 million. That's why
Yes.
I was asking the question.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sure. The last of the 5 goals that the board gave us, and one that I want to talk about because I think it's important in today's environment, is kind of the capital funding piece. How are you going to pay for all this? And we kind of took the approach as we were putting this together of thinking about flexibility. And we really did 2 things relative to funding and maintaining flexibility. First is we really appreciate the board support on hiring a consultant that's going to help us understand what's going on with growth in our community. Not only where is development happening, but what's that development going to look like in terms of the number of kids that it's going to produce, where are those kids going to go, what's our capability to house them in existing classroom space, what do our campuses look like. There's just a lot that goes into that. So that study, I think, is the first step. Second, we've tried to be real careful with how we spend the capital funds over time. If you notice in the 5th year, we've included a school that I've called Elementary J. There's a $40 million wedge in the 5-year program to pay for that school, but there really isn't a school to build yet, so it's sitting in your fund balance. So you really have a $45 million fund reserve at the end of the 5th year. Part of what we wanted you to understand is within the 5-year program, you have the ability, if you need to build another school without borrowing money, particularly in elementary school. There's enough money in the budget to do that. And then third, none of this program relies on borrowing. And I put, with Mitzi's help, I actually included some comments in here about what your debt service looks like today. But if you look on page 11, a couple of messages I wanted to share with you here. First of all, you still have 3 sets of certificates that are out there, and they're all pretty long-term. Notice that the first one doesn't pay off until 2024, so know that that's some long-term debt. That's okay, because if you look down there below, if you apply your policy that says no more than 50% of capital millage can go to debt, right now today you have a borrowing capacity of about $140 million. Next year this year we pay off the COP that funded all the elementary schools, Wilkinson and Venicell and Philippi. So that's not even figured into that $130 million. Your tax roll base is going up. So we think that next year your ability to borrow will be about $200 million. And there's nothing in the budget, in the 5-year plan, that causes you to do that. We've been real sensitive to holding that debt back till you get to a point where you have to build a high school.
We've capped ourselves at 50%, but the state has us at 75%.
That's right. And
so our interests are higher than what the state is.
Right. And the numbers in here reflect the 50%. So when it says $138.8 million in borrowing capacity, that's within your policy, not the state. Yeah. So it's actually more than that legally. You bet. So just know that there's a lot of capacity out there, and we've deliberately held that back because if, for example, we get to a point where we have to build a second high school in Northport, you're not going to be able to do that pay as you go. You're going to have to borrow the money, and so it's nice to know that you have the ability to do that if you need to. The 2 or 3 other things I put in there, just so you know, it isn't a specified board priority, but reducing reliance on portables has been a big deal for us over time. You can see we've been pretty successful. We've gone from a high of about 650 to about 350 today. Our enrollment projections, though, don't show us losing enrollment over the next 4 or 5 years. In fact, the opposite's likely to occur. So if we want to continue to reduce reliance on portables, the only way to do it is build classroom wings. And so you'll see a number of classroom wings in the 5-year plan intended to do just that, reduce reliance on portables.
Do you have any idea what it costs to build a wing, just ballpark?
It depends entirely on the size of the wing, obviously. $7 million. If you went to if you built a 12-classroom wing, about $7 million. And that's what we've talked about it at schools like Ashton. If you go back to the whole growth issue, though, one of my concerns is some of those schools, Ashton, Laurel, Nokomis, are in places that are really poised for growth, and there's a bunch of portables there already. Some of those campuses have footprint available to build a bigger classroom wing, and some don't. So one of the things I think we need to do is kind of wait and see how this unfolds. You notice 2 of the classroom wings I haven't labeled at all. They just say elementary classroom wing because, frankly, right now I couldn't tell you where's the best place to put them. I think we kind of need to wait to see what happens over the next couple of years and where do we see the enrollment coming from.
I think one of the things we have to work on is to get the state to look at capacity rather than fish capacity.
Yes.
Because that gives us much more flexibility.
You bet.
And we've had a decrease this year in some of our kindergarten students, in the numbers of kindergarten students and first grade students that are in schools, because we've had an opening in schools for the first time that we haven't been able to get new students in from a capacity standpoint. So my question is, and that really kind of equates to the recession, but is that permanent or is that just a hiccup,
And I think if you just kind of drive around this county and you look at what developers are doing in Sarasota County, there is growth everywhere. One of the things, and maybe it's a good place to transition to there, what isn't in this budget is the purchase of any property. And I included the pieces of property that you own already in kind of a land bank. We're in pretty good shape in the city of Northport. We own a couple of elementary sites, a middle school site, and a high school site. But to the extent that growth happens in the Clark Road corridor or as Lakewood Ranch comes south of University, so one of the things we're going to need to talk about at some point in time is when do we buy property, knowing that growth is going to increase enrollment in those areas. There's just so many unknowns that it's hard to tell. I think the long range planning study will help. We'll begin to understand what development is occurring where and what are the enrollment impacts of that. So
also the Laurel Nokomis area.
You betcha. Well,
I think that's prime for growth, even though no one's building there right now, and I don't think we have that much capacity in the schools there.
South Venice has us a bit uncomfortable too. That area that's kind of 776 River Road
that's
and 41.
Where I am in my brain.
Yeah, right around Taylor Ranch, everything down there is being developed. Yeah. So where do you buy property? Some of this will get caught up in proportionate share mitigation under your interlocal. It's the smaller developments, though, that 150, 200 homes. Those are the ones that are going to tax our capability.
There's a new one going in. I believe it might be Laurel, near Pineview. Is that Laurel or?
Laurel Road, yeah. There's a bunch on Laurel Road, which is just a little bit south of Pineview. So that's I feel so. What we've presented here, I think, is a program that we feel is responsive to your articulated priorities, plus some other things like the reduction of reliance on portables. The one thing that isn't in there is property, and we're just going to need to talk about that at some point in time. Do we reprioritize things in the out years to be able to buy some land? And I think our long-range planning study will help us answer that question.
Lakewood Ranch also. But I was speaking to someone, a gentleman at one of the functions I was at, and he has 28 acres to build a school. So I have to go meet with him.
Give him our phone number. So I guess my goal today was present you with this program, get any feedback from you. Are we recommending money go in the right places? Do they seem consistent with your priorities? And if so, what we would then do is use this program to form the basis of the budget that you would vote on in July.
As usual, Scott, I'd like to thank you. Excuse me. No, we're in workshop. You're Scott.
Yep.
You missed Olympic later. I'd really like to thank you for putting together such a thorough analysis of all of our capital needs and capital buildings that we have today. It was really, it's a long report, but going through it and reading it all was really very helpful.
Probably more narrative. First of all, know that it was a team effort. Without the Jody Dumases and Mark Smiths and Kathy Ebas and Ellery Gerards, and I know I'm missing somebody, Daryl Reika and Joe Benzwanger, everybody had input, so it was
But this is great because it allows me to highlight it in everything, so thank you.
No, our pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Scott. Now for the highlight of our morning, we have Al Wagner give us a budget update.
Can he make it inspiring?
And I'll try to be, well, is it afternoon yet? But anyway, I'll try to make it brief. One thing that was interesting, first thing this morning when I came in the office, I saw that we had the House budget. So I looked at that very quickly to see if that was anywhere near the governor's, and it is below the governor's. However, I must say the House budget is more realistic on the number of students in there. They have a growth of 24,800, which I believe they're probably using the data that all the school districts have given as to what they believe their individual school district enrollments will be. So from that aspect, I believe the House budget is much more reliable as far as the number of students in there. I know I did, and I know we're actually out of time as we speak here. This analysis I gave you on the governor's budget is very, very similar to what I gave you the last work session when I gave you both the commissioner and the governor. And this does, so I'm not going to go through unless you have questions or want me to go through everything. So, Shirley?
I have a question on the required local effort is that what the governor puts in for all counties, or is that what looks like it's going to be specific for Sarasota County? Because I think Sarasota County might be coming in under that, or would you expect that? Or
this is taking the, because on the governor's budget, I had the detail as to how much the required local effort would actually generate. And I was able to back into that because I had the discretionary millage rate. So with the tax roll the governor has there, and to get the actual money that's in the required local effort, it would have the required local effort just go up by a 0.016.
For Sarasota County, not for this.
Just Sarasota County, right. Because on the governor's budget, I did have the detail on every line item, all the categoricals and everything else. The only thing on the governor's budget I did was, because it had a very low student growth of only about 400 students, I looked at what the per student amount was on the governor's budget, and I added in that we're looking at a growth of close to 900 students. So I put in basically another $4 million to what the governor had on there to get our projection as far as revenues go to be pretty consistent, because on the expenditure side, I've got in there the additional teachers we would need based on the student growth. And of course, I've got in there a CPI increase of about 2%, group health, a mid-year 10%. Of course, you've already talked about that. We'll see where that goes. And there is no change on the retirement system. I know there's been some talk in the legislature about the actuarial amount. Maybe they want to change that a little bit, but I just have the regular Florida retirement rate in there. And really, what I've given you here is, in fact, why don't you go to page 2? I guess that might be a good place to talk a little bit about. On the bottom there, I have the Florida Education Finance Program-based student allocation. Under the governor, it's $4,178. The House budget that just received this morning is $4,130. So it's down. It's an increase from this year of about $98. But the one interesting thing is, I know in my prior budget presentation, I put in there on salaries of putting in the 1.25% that we negotiated, because there's a fixed dollar amount. In our contract, it indicates that if the base student allocation is not at least $4,164, that 1.25% does not kick in. So under what the House says there is that 1.25% would not kick in for next year, and I'd be reducing about $3.5 million out of the appropriations side, dependent on what how whatever comes out in final conference committee.
So that would, if the House is approved, then it doesn't kick in. If it does, if it ends up being the governor's budget, it would kick in.
That's correct.
Which would make the union leadership big supporters of Governor Scott.
I guess you could say that, yes. But anyway, there are an awful lot of unknowns right now, and I guess the bottom line that I'd like to talk about, or is there any other questions when you looked over the detail? Because everything, and I will talk a little bit about the House. I looked at, and I did this very quickly this morning, but I think I'm pretty much in the ballpark. The House would net us, after taking out the salary increase, about a $2.5 million issue that we'd have to use some additional fund balance to the tune of $2.5 million. Now, I do not have overcollections in the budget, and overcollections would be right around that same dollar amount. The reason I'm mentioning this is we have right now, as far as teacher vacancies, about 82, and most of them are filled with long-term subs. We have, in talking with our retirement person, Jarrett, a number retiring and drop as of June 30th. And we're going to have to the tune of maybe 110 or so teaching vacancies. And right now, what we had scheduled as far as timing goes, and what we'd be looking at, of course, is a status quo budget, is if we were able to release school budgets somewhere about the April 1st timeline, that would enable us to do staffing in late May, early June. And I know the superintendent has a real concern about not being very late in the process. So I just thought I'd jump to that because right now we are committed to, and Lori, maybe I'll let you jump in about the status quo budget, that there is no really additions per se.
That's what I'm proposing, is that we look at generally a status quo budget. There'll be some very minor tweaks just in the allocation process. We've got some had used Race to the Top funding that's run out, so some of those minor tweaks. But if there was additional dollars that did show up that we did not anticipate, and I really don't expect that. Our focus would be on some instructional tools, materials, so that they could be added late in the budget. I could come to you after the staffing. It wouldn't be involving people. That would be complicating the staffing process. I feel it is critical that we begin the process by April 1st in order to get ahead of every other district that also is seeing a little blip up of having more vacancies than usual, because remember, this was the year that we'd start to see the impact of those that chose to go and drop to avoid the contribution in retirement. So it's the first blip up. And I think it's going to be really competitive out there to get high quality teachers, and we can't afford to be late in the game. We are already, for example, Cabinet gave permission for posting 9 SLP positions that we know now we're going to need, because I know they're going to be in the budget, so we're not even delaying on getting those, because we'll never find 9, I can tell you right now, and that's their high cost to do contractors. So we've also have a couple of recruiting trips. We're doing much more. HR is doing recruiting. I want them to be able to offer binders so we can get those high need areas, teachers with the ESC certification, some of the other areas that are critical needs. So all in all, I never want to make the board feel rushed, but I feel because we're asking for a status quo that I think is what all indications are that would be the most appropriate, that if we can get a nod to begin to move the whole staffing process ahead with that in mind, I think it will serve our district well in being very much more competitive and getting highly qualified teachers.
Frank? I noticed that I'm on page 7. I noticed on page 7 that we're down quite a few teachers. Like our amended budget was 2475 and actual is 2395, but then we're projecting 2519. So that's a lot of teaching positions that we're down. So your intent is to, that's over 100 teachers.
So we have, in some cases, those have been just long-term subs, because we've tried where we felt it was most appropriate to continue to use long-term subs where we could find them. We've also been still allowing people to post, but I will tell you, you start posting teaching positions now and you're not finding anybody that meets our standards. It's just this time of the year, you haven't got the new group coming in. You have people that perhaps already have jobs. They're not transferring yet. So there is a window of time where you start to see applicants. And we would be looking at, when you look at the preliminary budget, you're looking at all filled position, or hoping for that is what our goal would be. And so that we would be allowing, as we have the last few years, to post all positions. So you're right. There's the gap of where we have unfilled positions now, plus the additional positions required by growth. That it's very critical with the attrition, with all the retirements and the normal attrition that we sometimes see on top of that. So we're going to be doing a little bit more hiring. You'll never find all those positions. So even though we post, we're only going to accept highly qualified teachers that we feel are the best for those positions.
Just a follow-up, we're also down social workers, psychologists and social workers, which we keep talking about what we're down. We had 30, we're down to 27, and you're looking at 29.
Now you're comparing the actual filled to the preliminary budget.
I'm looking at the amended.
Right. Well,
and then the actual. The amended was 30. The actual is 27.6, and the preliminary is 29.9.
We have some contracted individuals, so they don't show in that category, but we do have those. We do have some. We're in the midst of doing some hiring where we've had some recent vacancies. So I think you've still got the same number of positions. They just may not be showing on that line.
Lori, I actually had a conversation yesterday with Mr. Jones from Northport, and he was saying the same thing about trying to get aggressive in posting those. early in that niche of April, because essentially that's when we had the top quality people that we're going after. Is there a downside that we're missing as far as doing it earlier?
You're working off of projections, and we won't know what the specific revenues will be until the end of April. And so it's with not all the information that you have. But if we wait to have firm numbers, you miss the window of time.
But we pretty much come in right around where Al projects. We're very seldom are we way offline either way.
Right.
So that's why I feel confident in saying yes, let's move forward with this because of that, because of your track record and your history and your projections.
Well, I don't want to take all the credit there because
Your department.
Yeah, my department, but also your principals.
Everyone.
If they see that their kindergarten is not coming on target, they will not hire. They will, because they all do kindergarten roundup, and that's one of the grade levels that's really a true unknown. And they'll just keep units in reserve. And really all our principals do that. I know one high school last year, all of a sudden they said, whoa, what in the world's going on? And they didn't hire all the positions that they had. So we do have a very good culture here administratively with the whole team, principals and everybody else, that if they don't feel confident on their enrollment number or see the students enrolling, they hold off on hiring. So we're not in an overstaffed position because we do a true-up after the 5th day of enrollment, and then we do another basically staffing after the 5th day of school.
I just want to compliment Superintendent White. Frank, you probably know more than anybody else what budgets were like 10 years ago. There were increases in revenue, there was money available to be spent, and there were people trying to make names and making big changes in the district, and board members were in different places on those things. But, Laura, you're bringing this forward, and I think considering totally what's best for the district, considering what we need to do to get the best teachers in line for us when we start school next year. And I just think it's your history with the district and your experience that helps us with that calm, collected idea of what we need to do to get through to the next thing. And I guess we've come to expect that from you over the last several years. And I think it's made the budget process so much easier for all of us to go through. And I really appreciate that you're not trying to go out with a bang. You're trying to go out and keep things on an even keel and in good shape, and I appreciate that.
Well, my hope is I can go out with one balanced budget. That's all I ask for, one balanced budget.
Frank.
Okay.
Well, I've been talking about the fact that we're going to be losing a lot of teachers now. I think for about 5 years that I could see this ramp up. I think I've spoken of this very often. And it's not just true about Sarasota County, it's true all over the state. And so we are going to have to be aggressively going out and finding those teachers. You remember in 2001, 2002, when we did the first referendum, we were talking to people in Connecticut and all over the country. And we kind of stopped that for a while. But our teacher institutions that are training teachers are telling us that those numbers are down as well. So, and with the assault that we've had on public education, this all takes its toll on us. And in looking at and talking to some wonderful people in the House and the Senate last week, we don't have budgets yet. And so I think that this is a really good thing to do, because we really have to get out in front of this to get some of the good people that may be available out there. But I have great concerns on a continuing basis with what our numbers will be this year and what our numbers will be for the next 2 or 3 years, because we have to get those great quality teachers and get them in the classroom to replace a lot of people who are retiring. And it's true in our administrators as well. We have some principals and leadership going out, so it's a big problem.
This is the 30-year blip that we're seeing. We knew it was coming, but again, as you said, but it's a 30-year blip.
Anything else? All right, we're adjourned. Thank you, Val.